Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Garrett Horner. Today's edition, I want to talk about Soudal Quick-Step and Astana, mainly because Soudal Quick-Step have announced that their roster is full at 27 riders. That's 27 guys on one team, and they have room for another 3 riders if they want. So this is an interesting theory right here from Patrick Lefebvre, the general manager there of Soudal Quick-Step, to leave a little bit of an opening there in case something in the future changes. You never know. There's always a possibility some young, bright kid comes through the flying color, starts racing good, or maybe they bring up one of their Esquire riders or something like that, and they bring them onto the team. So you always have a little bit of extra space if you leave 27 riders on the team instead of 30. That's the plus. Of course, there could be a budget issue. We saw earlier in the season, in the end of the winter there, right when the 23 season was coming to an end, where Jumbo-Visma and Soudal Quick-Step were possibly merging. That, of course, broke off. Jumbo-Visma's found their own new sponsor for next year, it looks like, and Soudal Quick-Step's going to go their way. Now, Soudal Quick-Step have unloaded a bunch of riders, though. Davide Ballerini and, of course, Michael Morkov are leaving. They're going to go to Team Astana. So I want to talk about Team Astana, too, because that's Mark Cavendish's team. Mark Cavendish, 38 years of age this season. Next season, before the Tour de France, when Astana go into the Tour de France, and next season they're calling it year 35, where they're trying Project 35, where they're going to try to win that one more stage victory for Mark Cavendish to break Eddie Merckx's record. That's why I want to talk about these two teams, because when you look at them on paper, they both have a little bit of similarities. Not super strong. I know, right? Soudal Quick-Step, not super strong. Well, we're talking about Soudal Quick-Step getting ready for a Grand Tour and the Tour de France on top of that, which is the biggest, best, greatest race in the world when we're talking about just picking out one fantastic race. It doesn't come any bigger than the Tour de France. That's why we see Mark Cavendish trying to break the record, and we see Remco Evenepoel, the Belgian wonder kid, going to the Tour de France trying to win another Grand Tour to add on to his resume. But when I'm looking at the picture of these two teams, the 27 roster of Soudal Quick-Step and, of course, Astana, when we start comparing these two teams, I think Astana is 100% ready to go for next year's Tour de France in 2024 with Mark Cavendish, because he only needs one stage win. Now, if I was looking at their team and saying, wow, you still need 4 or 5 stages for Mark Cavendish, ooh, that's a tall order. But when you say you just need one stage win and you start looking over at Astana and their roster with Michael Morkov coming over there, 38 years of age too, just like his sprinter, Mark Cavendish, both those riders are going to turn 39 before the Tour de France. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But when you start looking at their team, adding Davide Ballerini, remember, when you're talking about Michael Morkov and Davide Ballerini, if you go back to the 21 Tour de France where Mark Cavendish won 4 stages and almost broke the record there in 2021, but came up missing one more in order to break Eddie Merckx's record, so he's still tied at 34. But when you look at adding those 2 riders that were on the roster of Quick-Step that year in 2021, you know Mark Cavendish is familiar both with Michael Morkov and Davide Ballerini. Ballerini is one of the best at the earlier lead-outs when we start talking about getting under 3K to go. He's going to be able to put Michael Morkov in that fantastic spot. And of course, they still have Case Ball left over from this season here with Astana. So you have Case Ball, Davide Ballerini that can do a fabulous amount of work when we're talking about under 3 kilometers to go to keep Mark Cavendish in a good position, and nobody does a better job than Michael Morkov. If I throw a little salt on the wound there of Mark Cavendish in 2021, the whole reason why he didn't break Eddie Merckx's record, or at least come closer. I don't know if he's going to break it, right? The butterfly effect doesn't always tell you that this is what's going to happen if you took my strategy, but it means, I think anyways, that it brings your odds closer. When we look at that stage 21, Mark Cavendish, when we're talking about in the Champs-Élysées, when we're coming out at 1.8 kilometers to go, Mark Cavendish is a little bit out of position, and when he's fighting, coming up that narrow section there where they're going by the Ferris wheel, he's spending a ton of energy, and he's back up there next to Michael Morkov's wheel before they come out of that last corner and come onto the Champs with about 800 meters to go. But he gives up the wheel of Michael Morkov and starts following, of course, with Wout van Aert. Loses that chance of winning. But there's more mistakes for Mark Cavendish and his Quick-Step team back there in 2021, because if I take you back to stage 12, at stage 12, that should have been a sprinter stage. I was working for NBC at the time, and that morning, all of us agreed that stage 12 was going to be a record chance at adding another stage victory for Mark Cavendish to even Eddie Merckx's record. At that point in time, he'd already won 3 stages in the 2021 Tour de France, and now when they went into stage 12 of that 21 Tour de France, Like I said, everyone at NBC was agreeing that Mark Cavendish was a hands-down favorite to win that stage. Then the break goes up the road with one Julian Alaphilippe, who was a teammate of Mark Cavendish. And now all of a sudden all the guys at NBC, Bob Roll and all the other guys, were saying that they were happy with that group. That was about a 15-man break up the road with Julian Alaphilippe. When I was sitting there at the booth, though, in NBC, I said, no, this is a crazy move. You don't want this move. You want to make it a field sprint. We all agreed in the morning, 100%, Mark Cavendish was the outright favorite. Now all of a sudden you throw in one marvelous form of Julian Alaphilippe in the group, and all of a sudden guys' minds start getting a little mixed up. They start getting crazy in the head. Bob started saying, hey, this is a great move. This is a fantastic move. Quick-Step should go with this because Julian Alaphilippe is in the move. I was saying this is a ridiculous move. There's no way you can go in this move if you want a shot at breaking Eddie Merckx's record. Of course, it's the Belgium team, so maybe Patrick Lefebvre thought, well, I don't want to break Eddie Merckx's record, so I don't want to give Mark Cavendish, my own teammate, a shot at winning the stage. So they went with the breakaway up the road and gave Julian Alaphilippe a chance to win. But like I said, in 2021 on stage 12, they're live at NBC. One guy, one Julian Alaphilippe, no matter how good he was, and he was very good in 2021, but no matter how good you are, you can't control 10, 15 other breakaway companions without help. That's why it was a mistake to try to go in that move when you could win almost for sure. I thought the butterfly effect, anyways, in my mind, was if you made it a field sprint, well, hell, everybody on NBC agreed Mark Cavendish was going to win that stage. That would have tied him up the record, and then later when he won his next stage, he would have broken Eddie Merckx's record. But now when we fast forward and you start looking at this Astana team, why am I so gun-ho on this team looking like Mark Cavendish can break the record? Well, they only need to win one stage. When we go over there and now we look at pseudo quick-step team and we start talking about Remco Evenepoel, looks a little more complicated, right? I don't know why, because you look at it and you look at one side and they both have good numbers. Pseudo quick-step have great riders wrapped around Remco Evenepoel. Ian Van Willer looks like he's on good form. It looks like he can climb and keep Remco Evenepoel near the front of the main GC guys throughout the Tour de France next year if he's on top form. Julian Alaphilippe, if his form can return to what we saw back in a couple years before his crash at LBL, we know for sure Julian Alaphilippe can be on good form. And I could just take you back to Remco Evenepoel's win at the Vuelta a España. And when you start looking at the early first week there, Julian Alaphilippe was marvelous up until he crashed out of that year's Vuelta a España. So his form has come up, but it's dropped back down. So we can't really rely on Julian Alaphilippe next year for pseudo quick-step. But if his form does come back up, and we're talking 2019, 2020, his double road world championships form, Julian Alaphilippe will be money for Remco Evenepoel to have a shot at winning next year's Tour de France if Remco Evenepoel can compete, of course, with the other three best riders in the world. When we're talking about Jonas Vingegaard, Tadej Pogačar, or Primož Roglič, those three guys are going to be the outright favorites. But of course, you got to put Remco Evenepoel in there, but can his team defend it? That is always going to be the question. Can Ian Van Wilder climb with the best in the world at the Tour de France? We haven't seen that yet. Can Julian Alaphilippe's form return? We haven't seen that yet. When we talk about Mikel Landa, the Spaniard that they added over there for pseudo quick-step to help Remco Evenepoel, how dependable is his form going to be? We know without a doubt, Mikel Landa is a quality rider. Gone top 5 in podiums at Grand Tours many times throughout his career. But as we all know, we're always let down just a little bit by Mikel Landa, a little bit too often. And I know for sure, without a fact, I'll say it up here for sure on Beyond the Covers, Mikel Landa can go podium in Grand Tours. There's no doubt about it. But can he go deep in the Tour de France on the important moments when Remco Evenepoel is going to need it? Well, that's always a question. And even when we look at Remco Evenepoel's form, it's still a question. We saw last year at the Vuelta a España with pseudo quick-step when they went into that stage 6 and they let Sepp Kuss go up the road with, of course, one Lenny Martinez from FDJ, and he had 2 teammates. Sepp Kuss had 3 teammates in there. That's 5 guys drilling 100% on the front to bring him into the last and final climb of that stage 6, where Sepp Kuss went on to win the stage. Lenny Martinez from FDJ took the race leader's red jersey at the Vuelta a España, and of course, Remco Evenepoel and pseudo quick-step made one of the biggest mistakes that I would call throughout the 2023 season when we're talking about the men's racing. The biggest mistake throughout the whole season had to be right there on stage 6 of the Vuelta a España from pseudo quick-step. So when you look at their team, I don't know if they're ready for the Tour de France next year. When you look over there at Astana and you start looking at Mark Cavendish and you go, well, Mark's only got to win one stage. Those guys are ready. With Michael Morkov, Davide Ballerini, Case Bowles, that's 4 guys, 3 leading out Cavendish, and of course one Mark Cavendish gives you 4 guys. That's half of a team, 50% right there. And that's not even adding in a few of the other guys, because they added Ida Schelling in there from Bora Hansgrohe to add into the depth. So you know Ida Schelling could easily do from 5 into 3, if not into 2.5K to go, to get those other lead out guys there from Mark Cavendish into that 250 meters to go. If you get Mark Cavendish into 250 meters to go, he's going to break Eddie Merckx's record. There's no doubt about it. At 39 years of age. Now I'm sitting up here because I won the Vuelta a España, the Grand Tour, at almost 42 years of age. I was only 1 month shy. So if I can win a Grand Tour overall at 42, then you know I'm there cheering for Mark Cavendish to be able to win and break the record of Eddie Merckx and take 1 stage victory in next year's Tour de France. When I look at that roster from Astana, they are ready to go, shining and looking bright for Project 35 for next season. Now let's get over Pseudo Quickstep just a little bit more and talk some more details. When we're talking about Pseudo Quickstep again, when you're trying to go 21 days of racing, that's the difference between the sprinters. Even though Mark Cavendish on his Netflix documentary series talked about how they race all 21 stages. Mark Cavendish, you don't race 21 stages of the Tour de France. You race 10, maybe 15 on a good year when you're going back into 2012 when you're racing for Team Sky there when Bradley Riggins won. That year you might have raced 21 stages. But aside from that 2012 season, any other time, sprinters, especially one of your ability and one that's going to try to win and break Eddie Merckx's record, you guys definitely do not race 21 stages. I almost laughed myself off the couch when I heard you say that. But let's go back and let's get into Pseudo Quickstep Remco Evenepoel, who does have to race 21 stages. Now, with that, keep in mind when you start looking at all of the mistakes from Pseudo Quickstep at the Vuelta a España last season, I just hope that Remco Evenepoel learns something, and especially hope that the DS, Patrick Lefevre, who allowed those mistakes to happen on stage 6, and the managers in the car on stage 6 of this year's Vuelta a España in 2023. Hopefully you guys learned something there. The mistake of letting Sepp Kuss go up the road was massive. You never let a quality rider that can climb the way Sepp Kuss can, and who especially still rides for Jumbo-Visma. I mean, anybody else. You can't let Primoz Roglic, you can't let Jonas Vingegaard, you can't let Sepp Kuss, who all 3 rode for Jumbo-Visma at the 23 Vuelta a España. You can't let those 3 guys go up the road and gain 6 minutes. Anybody else on the team, okay, it's questionable. You can let them go. Even if they get in the race leader's jersey, you can get that back, no problem. But you certainly, Remco Evenepoel, don't want somebody from Jumbo-Visma in that break gaining time that can climb and go deep into the race. So hopefully Pseudo Quickstep learned that. Although the problem I see mainly with Remco Evenepoel isn't his physical ability, because, man, he is marvelous. His interviews are fantastic. Thank you for that, Remco Evenepoel. Every time you give an interview, I love watching it because you always give something to talk about. And I agree with pretty much most of what you say, unless you're talking a few of the tactics. Then all of a sudden you get a little bit off page. But the biggest mistake I see when I'm looking at Remco Evenepoel, tactically, he keeps making mistakes. And when you look at the Vuelta a España, that was huge. But you can go back to the Road World Championships this year when we're talking about Glasgow. Those mistakes at Glasgow for the whole Belgium team were huge and, of course, helped for the reason why we see Mathieu van der Poel, who won that race. Now, I take you back to the Belgium Road World Championships a couple years before that. It kind of looked like Glasgow. Belgium was too aggressive. They were following moves wrong. Then you go to the next year when they're racing over in Australia, and, of course, Remco Evenepoel wins the Road World Championships, and he's wearing a rainbow band after that. So you start thinking, wow, he's wised up, he's made correct racing, and when you look at that Australian Road World Championships, it was intelligent racing. He followed the big breaks near the end of the race. He let the French team do way more work than they should have done with Remco Evenepoel sitting on, and then he lit everybody up with about 30 kilometers to go and rode solo with 25. So you can see at times where the tactics work out for Remco Evenepoel, but it was really the changing race and the changing tactics in the race delivered it so Remco Evenepoel raced intelligently, because then when you go forward to Glasgow and you see where Mathieu van der Poel is attacking up the road, and of course Remco Evenepoel is still attacking, he's going too early when Belgian team was way too strong. So every time when I'm looking at Remco Evenepoel, I see his tactics are always wrong and they haven't been fixed yet. Now, of course, the kid's going to be only 24 years of age, so there's reasons for why the mistakes are made. But when you look at his director sportifs in the car, there's no room for the kind of mistakes that we saw on stage 6 of last year's Vuelta a España. There's no room for the mistakes we saw at the Belgian Road World Championships at Glasgow, and certainly no room for the mistakes that we saw at the Belgian Road Championships when we go back in 2021 and they lost marvelously there to one Julian Alaphilippe, who won, of course, a World Championship rainbow band at the end of that race there in the Belgian Road World Championships in Leuven. Either way, when I'm looking here at the 2024 Tour de France, hopefully Remco Evenepoel's thinking, okay, I don't really need to win. When I look at Remco Evenepoel, I'm thinking, you don't have to win, but just learn a ton of information through this 2024 Tour de France while you're racing and hopefully put on a marvelous show. We don't want to see any kind of crazy tactics where then, of course, later, deeper into the racing, it costs and you explode like we saw at the Vuelta a España on stage 13. We want to see 4 marvelous riders, Tadej Pogačar, Jonas Vingegaard, Primož Roglič, and Remco Evenepoel all battling out. If I see where Remco Evenepoel races tactically a little bit smarter, because remember, Remco, there's 3 guys in front of you and they're better than you when we're looking at the top of the page of the list, when we're talking about the butterfly effect and beyond the coverage anyways in my book. Primož Roglič, Tadej Pogačar, Jonas Vingegaard, 3 top riders. Those 3 teams, Bora Hansgrohe, UAE, Team Emirates, and whatever Jumbo-Visma is going to be called next year, those 3 riders and their teams have to do all the work, Remco Evenepoel. So your Soudal Quick-Step team, if you come with not the best form, Julian Alaphilippe's not quite there, Ian Van Wilder's form hasn't come up to the Tour de France level, Vervaeke, maybe he's not hitting on all cylinders, and of course, Mikel Landa's not quite there yet because he's missed off and form's just not quite polished when we get to the 24 Tour de France. Remco Evenepoel, you might be all by yourself there on Soudal Quick-Step, so you need to just follow those 3 teams, make them do everything for you, take advantage of them, and then when you get close to the finish, not 50K, not 168 kilometers like at the Leuven Road World Championship, not at Glasgow Road World Championships where you're attacking after Mathieu van der Poel's attacking when you don't need to be. If you stay calm, if you let those 3 teams do the work, you won't need to have depth in Soudal Quick-Step unless, of course, you're so strong that you put yourself in the race leader's jersey after abusing those 3 teams. Then you'll need your teammates. But otherwise, if you race intelligent, Remco Evenepoel, when we're talking about the 24 Tour de France, you follow these 3 teams, you make those 3 teams do the work, you play off of those riders, and when you're up in the road, you just look at Remco Evenepoel, you look at all those guys, Jonas Vingegaard, Primož Roglič, look them in straight in the eye and go, I don't have to do any work. I'm not the favorite here, man. I'm 4th best rider here at the Tour de France. You guys got to do it all. I'm going to sit back here and relax until you guys blow up, and then I'm going to light you guys up. And then hopefully Mikel Landa, Julian Alaphilippe, Ian Van Wilder are on fantastic form, and they can climb good in whatever mountain stages that are left at the 24 Tour de France to protect my beautiful race leader's yellow jersey at the Tour de France. And we see Remco Evenepoel having a fantastic 24 season at the Tour de France. Either way, right now when I'm looking at it, we're still in the winter time here of 2023. Soudal Quick-Step's not quite ready, but they can be ready. Remco Evenepoel can certainly be ready with just a little bit of changing in tactics, and hopefully a couple of his riders come back up on form. Julian Alaphilippe, Mikel Landa, arrive at that top form of the Tour de France. Maybe Ian Van Wilder join you guys, and you'll have a marvelous team to start the 24 Tour de France. Like and subscribe. I'll bring you guys some more videos later in the future.